Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a ministry here in Houston that gathers people from all over Houston around craft beer to talk about theology and philosophy and ethics and maybe even politics. But this is our podcast where we have more time to delve into more topics. And this particular episode, White Pill Radio, is the version of the podcast that is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology that looks at news and current events from a Christian point of view. I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. We try to get real and try to be honest about the news and the current events as we see them, and then apply them with, good Christian theology. Anyway, I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. I'm on the leadership team of Theology by the Pint, normally joined by Sarah Stone. She could not be here today. It's an unexcused absence. I'm tired of giving her excused absence. This one is unexcused. But anyway, so it's just three of us today. But before I introduce our other two guests, I do want to encourage you to go to theologybythepint.org, theologybythepint.org, to learn about upcoming events. We have a mini event in February. We have two really interesting events coming up in March and April you'll want to know about. So sign up for them. Be a donor to the ministry. If you give $50 a month, then you get into every event, including food, for free, if you will. Anyway, but we do want to, if you like debate, if you like these kinds of conversations and you want them to happen in Houston or online, do help us out, because we are totally funded by you. We did not get any USAID money.
We did not get any money from USAID.
So anyway, theologybythepint.org. And as I said, I'm Evan. With me is Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken. I'm an accountant.
And chief volunteer, best volunteer of the whole lot. And then Cody, a regular on White Pill Radio.
Yeah, over here on the left, I'm Cody Pogue, ready to talk about all the problems with the Trump administration.
Let's go.
All right, well, you can't blame him for not doing things. So, there's a lot to critique or a lot to praise, depending on your point of view. So, well, let's jump in. We got lots of different ways we could go. I mean, just looking at my Twitter feed before we started, there was like three major things that Trump did, like in the last hour. He revoked Joe Biden's security clearance. Mm-hmm. He offered asylum to South Afrikaners in South Africa, like farmers that have lost their land.
Right.
And basically he's said that he's not going to give money to South Africa anymore. Anyway, there's something else. I was like, and that was just this afternoon.
So I wonder what's motivating this. I wonder if he had any big South African donors who might have donated to his campain.
Well, he does. Elon Musk is definitely a donor to the campaign, and putting a lot of time in. But I mean, I without knowing a lot about it, I think there are many people who do feel that what has happened to the white farmers there is nothing less of apartheid in reverse. Like sheer immoral driving people off the land, and so. I don't know. Do you know much about that situation?
It's a lot more complicated and a lot more violent than American, So what we did in Reconstruction, we still had a ton of segregation. And then when we desegregated, it didn't have as much racial tension as it probably should have had. We have Martin Luther King to thank a lot for that. And even on the more violent end, Malcolm X was kind of a separatist. He didn't really want to violently force white Americans to integrate. He kind of advocated for a parallel culture, right? For black people to step away and said, hey, white people, don't touch us and we'll be fine on our own, which I really respect. They didn't have that in South Africa.
Yeah.
The chants of kill the Boer, BOER, were all over the last 30 years, which is once they decolonized, you still had a bunch of white landowners still owning land that was basically given to them by the colonization experiment.
Yeah.
And then you had government officials taking the land away from the white farmers and giving it to some black farmers to varying degrees of success. But as with any colonization project, the colonizers that stayed there are going to have just a larger net worth than the local population. Yeah. And it was extremely violent, way more violent than we saw in the U.S., even though we actually enslaved people.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Well, maybe we'll keep our eye on that and see what develops out of that. Okay, well, this is a major campaign promise that Donald Trump made regarding deportations, and this was an article. It's actually now a week old, so maybe things have changed. But ICE arrests, that's Immigration Customs Enforcement, arrest across country as Mexico borders crossings plummet under Trump. So this is a Newsweek article, but basically it says, look, there are lots of raids going on. ICE is out there looking for the most violent. They are prioritizing the most violent people that have, detainers out on them, arrest warrants out on them, people that are in prisons already and should be relatively easy to arrest and deport. And so there have been, a couple of planes that have gone to different countries deporting people. And yeah.
I don't think it's violent criminals. It's just anyone with a criminal record. It's not necessarily a violent criminal record, which...
Okay. I think they're, but I've heard that they're kind of prioritizing the worst, the more violent people.
With an outstanding warrant and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a violent criminal record.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those are the easiest to pick up. But I've seen interviews with the guy in charge, the border czar, who basically said, if you're in the country, then you're a criminal. So when we say we're going after criminals, we mean everybody, right?
No, I mean,
which is a different implication than during the campaign. I think during the campaign, I think a lot of people now are kind of having second thoughts about this because they were like, no, he was going to go after the bad people. But now we're seeing stuff about elementary schools and different things like that.
Some of those weren't true, though. There was one about Chicago where they made a big fuss about it. The mayor, the governor made a big fuss about it, and they didn't go into a school looking for people. But let me say this: I will say I don't know that there was any lack of clarity. I mean, Trump said we're going to have the largest mass deportation program in history.
Well,
world history.
He even put quotas, which, I mean, I don't even like deportations. I'm open. Are you open borders?
No.
Oh, dang. I am the furthest radical here on this issue. But like, even if I was, for some sort of a border, I really wouldn't like the quota system.
What is that?
Oh, like he's instructed ICE to have like anywhere between like 1,000 and like 1,500. It's like 75 arrests per day, which would total out to, 1,000 or 1,500 by the time it's all said and done. Okay.
Well, to deport everyone that came in under Biden's watch would be something like 7,000 deportations a day.
Well,
so, because you're talking about 10 to 15 million, and that doesn't even include the people that were here illegally before that.
That would be border crossings, though. See, the thing is...
Yes, but how many of those were released?
Well, a lot of them go and come back, right? I mean, I kind of wish we had seasonal migration workers like they do in lots of Europe.
Well, I think we do have that.
But it's really hard to get that, and what I wish we would have is just a border where people could come in, work for who they want to work. People in America could hire who they want to hire. And if you want to go south in the winter, great.
Yeah. So why do people come here, though? I mean, do they all come here to work?
I would say the economic. Well, I mean, hold on. You can't simultaneously say they're coming here for our welfare and then also they're taking our jobs. Not you. I'm saying the MAGA movement simultaneously says they're coming to take our welfare and also they're coming to take our jobs. Right. And it's like, wait. They're either working or they're not working.
Well, but it's probably some of both. I think that, of course. I think that clearly the reason that the Western sort of first world countries, be it Europe or us, I think the reason they want people, they want to immigrate people into this country, maybe they have some kind of guilt complex about being white and successful. And there's some kind of liberal mantra about helping other people or something like that. And so maybe that's going on. I think generally they need more workers. So we have had a demographic bomb go off where we have baby boomers and, they didn't have enough children and their generation had even fewer children. We have all these people experiencing retirement age. It's the demographic mushroom, right? Yep. So you have all these people at the top, you have very few workers paying into a system. So I think the best case scenario is that we say, all right, open the borders, bring people in. They will do jobs that we don't have enough people to do. They will pay into the system and therefore help offset these very expensive retirees at the top with all their health care, et cetera. Now, I don't think that math works because they end up using our healthcare system. They are uninsured if they're not working legally or sort of half legally. They use our public school system. All of that costs money. So I don't think that we get an economic benefit out of it.
Right. But they're paying into all of that as well.
But
So
yeah, but not enough.
under fake social securities, which they don't collect tax returns on, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But hold on, the school system. Wait. If you want to deport somebody who like was raised in American schools, right? Like we've invested all the money into education, and then like what we want to send them back to another country with an American education, which is going to be way better than their education.
Okay.
Like we've invested in them.
Actually, nationalism would say make Mexico great again, make Argentina great again, make whatever, actually to be a nationalist is to say we want other countries to be great too. I'm not actually for the brain drain. And that's actually, that was a debate that came up with the whole
H-1B visa.
Yeah. Like, hey, we want the best and brightest to come here. Well, I don't know. I think actually the world is at peace when nations are successful, and nations will be more successful when the best in their nation are raised up to do for them. I don't want people to just come here and try to get rich,
Yeah. I just want to make sure we come back to this when we talk about USAID later on. But
Yeah. Well, I would say, so anyway, I would say, I have said that we should talk as a ministry about immigration for a long time, like as a whole event, and it has never come to pass. But what this story highlights...
Oh, you mean theology by the pint? Like
yes,
have an event on immigration?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always voted down. And I'm like, how... but for the last 4 years, it's been a major topic. We saw 10,000 people a day at its peak. 10,000 a day. Now we're down to about 400. And those 400 are not given some, I would argue, fake asylum and let into the country. The Biden administration literally put people on planes and flew them into the interior of the country.
And we are a theology debate series. And so I do imagine that would be very interesting to have the debates about like what the like Second Temple period Judaism, around the time of like Ruth and no, Ruth wasn't Second Temple, was she?
No.
Okay.
She was pre-temple.
Pre-temple. But like the whole rules in Judaism about the sojourner and the foreigner, it's like I've seen arguments on both sides. I don't know really one which I'm like more sympathetic to.
Yeah.
About like, is this pro-immigration or is this pro travel visas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think part of it might be. Generally speaking, I think that nations are important. I'm not an anarchist. I believe in rule. I believe in laws. I believe that for the sake of helping people, we need localized and the more local, the better, systems by which we know one another, care for one another, provide for one another, and that's essentially what a nation is. Now, do I think our nation is perhaps too big to efficiently do that? Probably. So we need like some kind of department that like works towards government efficiency or something like that.
Well, the United States has states, right, with open borders between them. And so if open borders for a country is a bad idea, why is open borders between states a good idea?
Well, they're
between your smaller and smaller communities, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like between the smaller and smaller communities that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
States are smaller than a country. So why open borders there?
Well, I think it kind of begs the question of like, what is a nation?
Okay.
So, that's a debated point, but I would argue it's a shared culture, a shared language, a shared understanding of the way the world works, a shared social contract. Why, do people that come from Africa or India or China, do they have our identity as a nation? No, of course not. Just like if I went to any of those places and I said, here I am, I'm an American, I expect you all to do stand, salute the flag, this is our national anthem, we like cheeseburgers and, whatever, right? Whatever I expect you all to know all these movie references from the, 90s action films I'm about to lay down, okay? So, no, of course I wouldn't act like that. I would go and I would say, well, this is your nation. You have certain customs. You have certain ethics. You have certain values. You have certain languages. You eat certain foods. It's superficial things, but it's deeply meaningful things, And so I would adapt to that environment because that's a nation. A nation is a group of people that has enough shared customs to be differentiated from another.
I just want to call it nation. I have to call it culture and customs because you're going to have way different cultures and way different customs even within the United States, right?
Yeah.
Like Texas and New York and even New York and Boston are going to be way different than each other.
Yeah.
Right?
or Houston and Conroe.
Houston and Austin, right? Like Austin is a
Sure.
subculture. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more about, I would be for open borders if the nations around us were prosperous and stable and all of that sort of thing. Because I just don't think you can accept too many. If you have this one place where everybody wants to come to and there's a lot of poverty and a lot of instability, I just don't know that that's the right thing. But for people who have been here, who grew up here, who've been here for a long time, it only makes sense to have a pathway to citizenship, especially if they're married to a citizen, if they have kids who are citizens. And the interesting argument I see from a lot of Trump supporters is it's not fair to people in Mexico if the people who are here who came across illegally get citizenship, but it doesn't seem like it's fair to us to deport the person across the street who has a family, who has kids, who might be our teacher or a doctor or the person we sit next to in church. So in a way, it's like they're putting people in other countries ahead of us.
I want to piggyback what you said about our neighbors because, like, Americans don't know how good they have it to have like Mexico and Canada as neighbors, right? Like, you look at the immigration problem in Europe, and it's a problem that you have not only the poverty but also the religious radicalization, right? Like, we have some issues with cartels, and that's kind of it. Versus, what's going on in Europe.
Yeah.
We have some of the best neighbors comparatively.
Yeah. And I know several people from Germany, Austria, and they tell me the immigration there is changing their country in a very radical way. It's not just kind of like Muslim ghettos or something. It's kind of everywhere, and it's really changing the fabric of their communities in very real ways. So, but I would say best case scenario, again, it was like, yes, we need workers, we need people to pay into the system. I think even if the math worked out, I wouldn't agree to it though for cultural reasons. I don't, because if there isn't assimilation, then it's going to lead to conflict. But I think the more cynical view would be that yes, well, they wanted voters, that whoever's in power, eventually wants to turn those people into voters.
Well, hold on, Republicans did the same thing with wet foot, dry foot, right?
What's that?
If you're from Cuba and you make it over, citizenship, right? And it's like, well, yeah, they're voting Republicans, right? If this is cynical, Ken, right over here. But if the Catholicism of Mexico drove them to vote Republican, I would see this shift 180 degrees.
I would say,
and Republicans would be begging for more immigrants, and Democrats would have closed the border.
Both parties have supported immigration. It was only Trump who didn't, I would argue. I mean, Trump went against both parties and did that.
So I don't know, because two things. First of all, I don't buy into the cynicism because I think that that's just too long term. I don't think that politicians are thinking like 10, 15 years down the road, these people might become citizens. I think they're much more concerned about the next election next year, and that's not going to impact that. But if you look at immigration and deportations, Trump is actually at the bottom. Compare him to George Bush,
Obama.
Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, the deporter in chief. But I think
he's just getting warmed up.
Right. But I think the big difference between Trump and Obama and all those other people is whereas Obama was deporting a lot of people coming across the border, Trump is going after our neighbors. He's going after the people that we've known for a long time. And I think that's the big difference. Well, I think Obama was more serious about the border.
I don't think he's gotten there yet. I think he might. I mean, that was what Tom Homan said. It was like, well, if you have a citizen and non-citizen and we have to deport the non-citizen, you can stay together as a family by the citizen, leaving or something like that. That's just a reality. I think that in almost everything he does, Trump starts with the hardest possible negotiating tack. And I have a hard time believing that we're going to get to a place where everyone is going to be deported. But I think he has to say, look, we're not going to be the dumping ground of the world. Okay, you don't get to unleash your prisons and put those people into our country. There were people that came into this country in the last 4 years from like 150 countries. People from all over the world were clearly invited into the world and said, and the administration said, come in. They flew them in. I mean, I don't know how that's not totally offensive. It's offensive to every sensibility that I am, because ultimately those people are going to be competing for resources at best.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
Or jobs. But yeah, I mean, so no, but to me, again, as I kind of said on our last episode, like, this is a choice. This was a choice that was made. It was clearly a choice that thousands of people would be let in per day. They would be put on they created an app for them, the CBP app that came up in J.D. Vance's debate, for example. They are getting government largesse to be here. So yes, they are not all just working. How can they work if they don't have legalized papers? So
well, that's my point. Yeah. Is like, how can you possibly expect them to assimilate if you essentially enforce these ghettos of people that like won't call the cops whenever crimes happen because they know they have like a Tio or abuela that like doesn't belong here.
So do you agree that there should be like no what government? I hate to use the word welfare, but welfare do you think the government should provide?
So here's the Bernie Sanders from, I guess, like 8 years ago and Rand Paul from like 8 years ago. Both had the same opinion on welfare and immigration. You can't have a welfare state and open borders. And like the Rand Paul and Ron Paul was even more open borders than Rand Paul. They were saying, no welfare state and come in and assimilate on your own terms. Right?
Do we have a welfare state?
We definitely do.
Okay.
And Bernie Sanders, which is one of the reasons why he was very closed borders. He like up until a couple of years ago, he was very closed borders.
No, I'm serious. Like
he got bullied by the squad. AOC. Okay. Yeah. But he was saying you can't have open borders and take care of your labor. It was a like labor argument, right? And take care of the labor base inside of the U.S.
Okay. Yeah, and you see the same thing with Cesar Chavez as well when he's organizing the United Farm Workers, because he knows that if people can just come across the border, then that's going to undercut his strikes. You can't have the people go on strike in Southern California and then just have people coming across the border as strike breakers. So,
oh, interesting. Okay, so he was unionizing farm workers who are largely Mexican in like California and such. Okay, and so he didn't want open borders either for the same reason, because they would be scabs.
Yeah.
Is that a wrong term to use?
I like scabs.
I mean, we liberals like
you like them.
I like scabs
because it's free, because you're free market. But
which is why I'm open borders, right? Like if you like tariffs now and you didn't used to, but whatever. I'm free market, so I'm like anti-tariff and open borders.
Right. Generally speaking, the right was free market absolutists, and I think someone like Trump said we're getting robbed in that system. It's not looking to.
I don't think he knows the difference between the national deficit and a trade deficit. I don't think he knows what the difference. Listening to him talk over the last couple of days,
not stupid. I do think he knows the difference.
Okay, but you mentioned the asylum sinkers, the world's dumping ground.
Yeah.
If you listen to some of the first conversations he had about the insane people, remember that rant he went on about Hannibal Lecter coming? I think he thought for about a week that asylum meant that they're dumping their mental institutions over, because when he was talking about asylum, he started talking about like Hannibal Lecter and them dumping their mental institutions here. And I was like, do you not know what asylum is?
No.
In the same way.
No, I think he does.
I don't think he knows.
And I think he knows that asylum is actually, the best exchange to watch would be when AOC questioned Tom Homan several years ago, and this whole question of like, what is a criminal comes up, because she's saying, he is saying by default they are criminals. Karen Levitt said the same thing from the podium, last week at the press, in the press room. So basically, if you come into our country illegally, we consider you a criminal. That's a very different point of view from the previous administration.
For sure.
It's a point of view I happen to agree with.
However,
just like if I went into Mexico without proper papers, a passport, some kind of visa, or whatever it is that they require, I would be a criminal in their eyes.
However, the last administration, less than 5% of their deportees had anything other than an immigration violation.
Yeah.
Like 95% of everyone that was deported in the last year only got deported on immigration violations and no other crime.
Okay, let me ask you this. Given that we're a welfare state, is it a good thing that we are now seeing 400 people at the border, they are all being apprehended and told to go home?
I think that the welfare state will be unsustainable if immigration continues, right? Also,
already unsustainable.
Depending
on how you define welfare state, but go ahead.
You beat me to it, right?
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are eating up way more of our budget.
And I would say those aren't welfare because people paid into. Well, they paid into it. Your taxes are taken out of your paycheck. Your 15.2% or whatever it is. That is a contract the government made with you. It's the government's. So I'm not in favor of taking those away, although they have to be reformed because they're killing us financially. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
But no, not everyone who gets
I don't
Medicare.
consider that
Social Security is a different argument, which
Okay, fair.
If
Because
you-
Medicaid is really more like the welfare aspect of it.
Right,
because
and then
it's
Medi-
government health care for the poor.
and Medicare is for elderly.
Yeah,
And-
but they pay into that.
Well, some do, some don't, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
don't know.
and the Social Security question is it's infuriating to somebody who has a retirement account, because if you track Social Security over the Dow Jones Industrial
Oh, yeah,
Index
yeah.
or the S&P
It's
500,
terrible.
it's terrible.
They need
Yeah.
to get Pelosi's investor on that stat. We'll all be rich. Yeah, but it's a boondoggle. But I wouldn't consider that welfare. But my
Why
point-
not? That eats up the majority of our non-discretionary funding, which is the
No,
majority of our budget.
I agree, and I think it has to be reformed. I think that, and Elon Musk just today said there's $100 billion of waste in Medicare and Medicaid. His guys just today went into that and are looking and seeing what they can find. I don't know
Food
how
stamps
true
and
that
public education are small potatoes compared to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social
is. No,
Security.
I
And
I
military.
understand that.
And what?
And military.
Military is even smaller than those three. But yeah,
But the moment anyone tries to reform it,
I agree.
and Trump said he's going to be looking at the military, very soon as well, and the Department of Education. But that the moment anyone tries to reform those things, they are going to be called, grandma killers. I mean, you know that.
I know that.
You remember the thing with Paul Ryan,
Death
shoving his
panels,
grandmother in
what-
the death panels,
Yeah.
Obamacare. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
so. But we have to be like adults at some point.
Well,
Like
no,
at some point, we have to say, "Hey, these things have to be reformed. It's unsustainable." But
Mm-hmm.
I think that the government shows us they have a fiduciary responsibility to us, the taxpayer, to have an efficient, responsible government that is operating, I would argue, within the bounds of the Constitution, which it is clearly not now.
Well, the Medicare issue is that inverted, that mushroom
Yes.
population
Yeah.
thing, which is the problem, right?
Yeah.
We don't have enough workers now.
Right.
We have all these people retiring, and they are taking up a ton of the medical resources. It's why
Yeah.
insurance premiums are so high.
Right.
It's why Medicare is so expensive for everyone.
Why can't we ever have that conversation, though?
What do you mean?
I mean, the world, this country cannot have an honest conversation about our financial pitfalls. And I think it's because it's a political loser.
It is. It is the
It's-
third rail of politics
yeah.
with Social Security.
It's just so much easier to just be like, we're going to keep giving and we're going to keep giving.
money printer go brrr.
Right.
But the
Right.
same thing can be said about we're going to keep cutting taxes on the wealthy and we're going to keep bringing it lower and lower and lower.
Well, actually, Trump is getting rid of some of the tax cuts for the wealthy. I mean, you should like Trump a lot more. Look, he's a populist, okay? He's a populist. You're an old-fashioned liberal.
He
he's
says
a
populist
centrist.
things.
He's a communist. He's
What?
not a communist.
I agree.
Common sense.
I agree.
Common sense.
No.
No.
We got it on tape. Trump is a
But
communist.
just the other day, he released the tax changes he wants, and two of them were taking away tax cuts for billionaire sports owners, and there's a particular thing. It's kind of a caveat. It's retained earnings or something. There's a particular tax loophole for the wealthy that he wants to get rid of. So I don't know. It looks pretty good to me. But let's keep going. Or, no, you can have the last word on that.
Oh, well, with the rich paying their fair share, it's what percentage of the income tax burden do you think is held by the 1%? What percentage of the national income, the revenue that comes in from individual tax returns, what percent of that do you think is coming from the 1%?
I'm not sure. What do you think?
It's 40%.
Right.
The 1% are paying 40% of the tax
and
burden.
how much of the wealth do they have?
And so income, well, hold on. Wealth versus
Right, cash.
Income.
liquid wealth
Yeah.
is what I'm saying, right? Because Zuckerberg, Elon, and Bezos, that's all tied up in the stocks of their company,
Right.
which would have a downward spiral if they tried to liquidate.
And those three people are worth the half of the entire country is worth or something.
It's the income inequality is complicated, but income inequality does correlate with crime. So I'm interested in that conversation.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's
Yeah. What is fair is is a hard it's a value question.
well, the Thatcher quote, right? They would rather the poor remain poor provided the rich were less rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Trump said some interesting things about Gaza. So, Ken, you want to have a couple of thoughts? Introduce the issue and.
So I freaked out yesterday when Trump said boots on the ground was not off the table when he started talking about the U.S. developing Gaza for a wonderful international place of trade and commerce, and even a good place to live
The
for
world needs more resorts, Ken.
and even a good place to live for the Palestinians, is what he was saying. They can even come back once we're done building it. I panicked when he said boots on the ground are not off the table, and I'm relieved that today he said, no, never mind, we don't need
Yeah.
U.S. troops.
Yeah.
That instinct that you said earlier to say the most bombastic thing first and then walk it back later.
There's a theory he was.
We can argue whether that's a good trait to have
Yeah.
in a president. I don't know that that's a good
It's
trait.
the art of the deal and all that. There's a theory that he was negotiating with Bibi in real time.
Right.
That Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel.
I don't know that I
controversial.
like the golden pager. That's kind of weird.
So
Oh, Bibi Netanyahu handed him a golden pager.
I did not see that.
Oh yeah, that's kind of weird, huh?
That's-
Like, he's like, here you go, and
Don't
Trump's
put
like,
it in your pocket.
that was a
going back to the
wonderful.
pagers that, you know,
well, because
blew
Trump
up.
had praised that operation so
Well,
much.
come on, dude.
It was brilliant.
It's a praiseworthy
Yeah.
operation. But,
Oh, they had like 2 casualties or civilian casualties.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone they targeted was who they intended to target. It was
Yeah.
fantastic.
did you?
Oh no, I think that Trump, this is his go-to. I think he really does want this because I mean, imagine a Trump Tower right there. I think he envisions that as the best thing that could happen.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, it is like on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, right? I
Right.
mean, it's extremely valuable
Prime real estate.
Real estate. So the fact that it hasn't been developed in such an obvious manner is,
Yeah.
is somewhat telling. I mean, the whole thing makes me quite sad because it does make me wonder if now all the developers are just licking their chops, going, oh, look at all these shells of buildings. Look at all those buildings we get to destroy. Like, this is a wasted opportunity to not be developed. And it's like, but I think there's a lot of things at play.
There's so many things.
I
Going
think
on here.
here's what I think the big one is. You have 2 million people that have nowhere to live. I don't know if all of Gaza is destroyed. I don't know if the drone cameras just show us like the worst aspect of it or
I
what.
think it's mostly northern Gaza is what we're
Okay.
looking at. Yeah.
Okay. But regardless, there's a lot of people without homes. There's a lot of people that need to be displaced. I think that what Trump is saying is Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, you need to absorb these people. They can't go back here because they can't be trusted. There's not going to be a 2-state solution. It's never going to happen. And after October, what it feels like is October 7th gave Israel an opportunity to just end it right then and there. Just say, no more Gaza. We're not going to have Palestinians on our border anymore. And I think basically Trump has been hoping that someone would come up with some mature solution that the Palestinians can go into other countries. The other countries steadfastly say absolutely not.
Mhm.
So, and my question is, why not?
Well, Jordan and Lebanon still hasn't given them citizenship status. We've got like 30-year refugees
Yeah.
that don't have Jordanian citizenship and don't have Lebanese citizenship.
What is that? What do you mean 30-year refugee? What is that?
Like from the first and second Intifada,
Okay.
right? When a bunch of the Palestinians got expelled, they just lived in Jordan and Lebanon as just stateless people.
Okay.
And that's the entire problem with the Gaza Strip is like, it's stateless.
Yeah.
It's not, they don't have voting rights in Israel. And you can understand why. You can be sympathetic. Like, this is the most, it's complicated,
Yeah.
conflict in the world. You can understand why Israel wouldn't want to give, 7 million Muslims, like, voting rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would overturn the Knesset
Right.
in a day.
Right.
But, like, you can't just leave them as a stateless people.
Right. But I think that they kind of were left alone for 20 years. I mean,
You're talking about between the Ottoman Empire and Egypt, or between Egypt and
no,
Israel?
I mean like for the last 20 years before October 7th. I think, they were relatively left alone. I think Jerusalem kind of pulled out, or Israel kind of pulled out. I think they were more involved at that time. They kind of pulled out about 20 years ago and said, all right, you want to have the PLO, or you want to have Hamas, you want to have your people, fine, just leave us alone. And, for the most part, other than a few skirmishes from time to time, that was the case. October 7th was a total game changer.
It was.
And I think basically now they're like, screw it. We're not going to be nice anymore. We're just going to take it. And I think Trump is kind of, hoping everybody can play nice. If the Palestinians, I think there has to be no allegiance to Hamas. I will say this. The more I think about a lot of these issues, I look at El Salvador over and over and over again and what Nayib Bukele has done there. And part of what he did in making that the most violent country on earth to one of the safest countries on earth, he has like a 90% approval rating. Yes, he's accused of being a dictator. I don't think he is. I think that basically he's a strong armed guy who said, this is how we're going to do things for the people. He made MS-13 and another popular gang, I can't remember the name of, illegal. Okay. And that means that to be in that gang, to have MS-13 tattoos, etc., those images were illegal. You can't put that on a cemetery. They literally went into cemeteries and destroyed gravestones of people that put MS-13 insignia on gravestones. And, he built massive prisons. By the way, this would be the lead story in any other news cycle. We have an outsourcing agreement with El Salvador for our prisoners.
For American
citizens. And I don't know how I feel about that. But again, it's like, we're going to put everything on the table, And basically, El Salvador is like, sure, you pay us to do it, and we'll do it. We have really good prisons now, good in terms of controlling crime, good in terms of trialing criminals. But you look at what he's done, and I think about Hamas. I think about how are you going to have Palestinians live there? It would be similar. Like, you can live here, but no more Hamas. No more allegiance to this. It is going to be outlawed, And I wonder if something like that is possible. If there's some way that we can say, we want to live in peace. I think Trump actually really does love peace. I think he is a peaceful person. I don't think he's a crazy warmonger at all. I think he wants to find a peaceful solution. And I think if the solution I think that's a negotiating ploy. I think what he was actually doing.
Well, I don't think it's about peace, right? It's the MLK quote about like peace and justice, and why like the white liberal was kind of even more scary than the KKK because like you can't see the wolf's fangs, right?
Did he say that? I thought that was a Malcolm X quote.
They both talk about white liberals a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the MLK was really, really obsessed with like it's not. Peace should not be the goal, right? There was relative peace under segregation. It's not about peace. Nobody in the Israel-Gaza conflict wanted peace. They wanted justice, right? Yeah. Which is why like tons of Gazans are not going to want to go for this. They view it as their land. They view it as the land of their ancestors because it is the land of their ancestors. Guess what? It's also the land of the Jewish ancestors. Yeah. It's really frustrating that the Jews can't excavate underneath the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
Right? They're not allowed to excavate on the Temple Mount because the Arab ownership of the Al-Aqsa Mosque says no, we're not allowing you.
I'm saying but I don't know the name. Right. There's a gold dome there. I know that.
Yeah,
that's a mosque.
Yeah, Al-Aqsa Mosque is owned and controlled by various different Muslim not organizations. I think they're like para-state entities, and they absolutely do not allow excavation underneath there. Why?
Yeah.
Because they'll find out that it's also the homeland of the Jews too, right?
Well,
which they deny.
The homeland of the Jews. I mean, Islam itself is
Sure.
I'm sorry, it's from our point of view, it's a false religion. It comes along and says things about Christianity and about Judaism that are false. And it claims to be from God.
But the Jews would say the same things about the Christians, right?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And they're both wrong.
They think we're fan fiction. We think the Mormons are fan fiction, and everyone thinks like the.
I mean, I've said before. I think that Israel is a political ally, an economic ally. It makes sense to be friendly with them, to have a friend in that part of the world. There's a lot of oil there. We need to get along with a lot of people there. Blah blah blah. But like, I don't have a special like Christian connection to. I mean, yes, we share scriptures, but our interpretation of even some of those scriptures we share is radically different in light of Jesus. I think Jesus can bring peace to that land. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not terribly worried about Gaza becoming, Las Vegas or something. I think that there aren't any easy solutions. So I think him dropping the proverbial bomb of like, okay, we're going to turn it into the Riviera is like, well, let's start with there. Let's start there. So if you don't like it, give me another.
And I'm more upset about the displaced people, right?
Yeah.
And even more than displacement, I am way more upset with all the collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
You can argue that like the collateral.
But it has to be redeveloped if they're going to move back.
No.
There's nowhere to live.
I'm not talking about buildings. I'm talking about like babies, right?
Oh,
like you can argue that like, oh, it's comparable to the Iraq War. Yeah, but like, not with the number of children that were killed in this conflict. The number of like kids under 5 killed in this conflict is greater.
Displaced.
Well, I said I'm worried about displaced, but even more than like that breaks my heart.
Okay.
The stuff that's gone on over the past year like breaks my heart even more. Like Justin Amash, one of the coolest congressmen we ever had. I'm so sad he's gone. He had like 2 extended relatives die. Christian Palestinians living in Gaza that were like bombed. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to care about human rights. I think we need to care about people. But even if we just bring it back to sort of the, we're focused on America kind of thing, if we don't do the right things in these situations, we end up with more terrorist attacks on us, right? So I don't think we can.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think we can just push people off their land who see it as their land. I think we have to find some way to respect what they're asking for and figure out how to make it work. We've been trying since Jimmy Carter. I don't know what the solution is. I think it has to be a two-state solution.
Yeah.
But,
well, I don't think the other side wants a state. I don't.
Well, neither one wants it.
I don't think either one wants it.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. It's like if I agree to give you this land and you agree to give me that land, can we just finally be at peace and work this out? You know, and it's like that. They never seem to come to that. But connected to that is, it's not really a story we necessarily going to talk about, but it made a lot of news, which is the USAID basically being shut down. I mean, almost overnight, and what that actually was. And I don't want to get into it, but if you spend any time sort of trying to understand, I don't know, things like political assassinations, like JFK's assassination, and you start to come to believe that the CIA is which is what the left believed for 30 years. The left was apoplectic for a long time that killing JFK was an inside job, and maybe
the far left.
What's that?
The far left, not the Democrats.
Okay, fair. But anyway, I mean, I think that if you kind of start to take a look at the CIA, you learn about USAID pretty quickly, and like what that actually is, and how we oversaw regime change operations, and how we use charity as
You're speaking my language.
As a way to get into other nations, and like it's a way we can bribe people. It's a way we can.
It's the carrot on the other end of the stick.
Yeah. Obama's mother worked for USAID in Indonesia. That's why he lived there for a time. So anyway, I can't remember how I was going to go to that, talk about that, but
well, I was just going to say, there's this idea that we're just giving away money to the rest of the world, and people will say we need to care about Americans first, right? And first, I would say I don't think that even if we shut it down, suddenly Donald Trump is going to start taking care of homeless Americans or whatever. But what I wish people realized is that when we are giving money to help people in other countries, the aim is always to help the United States. We try to fight AIDS and HIV in Africa because we don't want an HIV outbreak in the United States. We help hungry people in the Middle East because we don't want ISIS to come and help hungry people in the Middle East and turn them into our enemies. Every dollar that we spend, it's meant to save us lives, money, or to help American business interest in the long run. And I will say that there have been many things that they've done that have been problematic, but overall, I think we're making a huge mistake if we throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, we're just going to stop doing it altogether.
There's still 297 employees at USAID.
I'm going to push back on that. I don't necessarily think the terrorism problem is a poverty problem. I get that a lot from other anarchists and leftists that are in my circles. Like some of the most radical Islamists in these Europe attacks, some of the most radical Islamists in some of the early 2000s were like educated. Were really, really well educated people that just lacked meaning. It's a crisis of meaning, not necessarily a crisis of like hunger or poverty or water rights.
Yeah, I totally agree. But in Iraq, for example, we created chaos with the war, right? And then you had people who they didn't have any kind of government stability, and ISIS came in and started picking up the trash and doing the government services, and these people became
it is the de facto government of part of Iraq and Syria right now.
Yeah. Right.
Well, just like Hamas was.
So I totally agree with what you're saying, but when there's a vacuum, it opens the door for people who have different interests than us. So.
Well, I just don't necessarily trust that when we go in with, food or provisions, we do that, but then it seems like, I don't know, we train the armed militia to overthrow a government, I mean, and we've admitted that. I mean, I think the CIA is estimated to have been in something like 70 to 80 government overthrows.
Yeah.
I mean, at least probably. Right. That's like probably what we know of. So, and maybe the government that got installed was better than the previous one, and a lot of times it was probably worse. It was probably just people who did our bidding, and enriched our corporations.
Yeah,
and
back in the-
then we have instability, and then the blowback is worse.
Yeah,
later.
back in the 1950s in Iran, they had a Western-style democracy,
Yeah.
but they were going to nationalize their oil industry, which was bad for our oil business. So we overthrew their government. We put a puppet regime. Eventually, there's the blowback, and now one of our biggest enemies.
The overthrowing of the Shah of Iran is one of the craziest stories in like international history.
Yeah, the Shah or of Mossadegh.
Who was the Shah of Iran in the 60s when we?
Okay, Shah.
Yeah.
He was our puppet person, right?
Well, yeah, but then after that, when we overthrew Mossadegh, the Shah came in, but then the Ayatollah replaced the Shah,
right?
And like that, like 3-person chain is a crazy story.
Yep.
This is a story to try to maybe be a little more upbeat, but this is a story it's actually from Inauguration Day, but I just saw a reference to it. It's a Newsweek story, but the poll is from CBS, and it says that basically young people are more optimistic than ever. So this was a poll of 2,100 people, different age groups, and I'm trying to look for the numbers. Somewhere there was a chart. Anyway, this I can't find the exact number. Apologies for that. But basically, it said that the youngest people in the poll were at a 67% optimistic rate. Aged 18 to 29, where 67% of them said they're feeling good about the incoming president. So that's really interesting for a lot of reasons. One is that the youth tended, in the olden days, were sort of more liberal or progressive, and so a guy like Trump, orange man bad, and all of that, you would think that they would have been pretty radicalized against him, and yet they feel good about what's going on. And generally speaking, the older the group, the less optimistic they are, which was also kind of interesting. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what to think of it. I mean, I will say that I'm more optimistic. I feel like things are possible again. I think that we have a real opportunity to figure out what our government's actually been up to for the last, I don't know, JFK, 1963, checks watch, 62 years. When I think the regime change of our actual government and how it actually worked really kind of fell into place. But that said, I think that. I don't know. I mean, I know people hate Trump, but I'm like, love him or hate him. I think it should be pretty obvious that he does put the American people first, and he does want the American people to do well. So I can see why people would be optimistic. So I don't know. I'm curious from Cody, not to necessarily put you on the spot, but I'm curious as to where you think, how does the left sort of adapt to this environment? What are the priorities? What are the policies? What are they just elected new DNC people? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so one thing that I think a lot of conservative people don't realize is that in the Democratic Party, there's really been sort of a civil war since about 2010 or so in the party.
Okay.
It really starts with Occupy Wall Street. And then in 2016, if you go back and you find videos of maybe 2011, and I'm marching down the street chanting, the banks got bailed out, we got sold out.
Is Zuccotti Park?
No, in Houston.
Oh, in Houston, okay.
In Houston. In Houston and in Kingwood at the time. But we were protesting against Obama. We voted for Obama. We were like, hope change. Yes, we can. But then we were protesting Obama's policies. Then in 2016, Hillary Clinton was the chosen one. And we found this long shot, grumpy old man from Vermont. And we said, that's our candidate. And he didn't stand a chance. But he was talking about how the system's rigged against working class people. And we came out in huge numbers and supported him. And we came pretty close to winning that election. Then Trump came on the scene, and I think this was a big mistake, but we saw Trump as the worst thing that could possibly happen to the United States. And we were right about that, I think. But we made a strategic decision that we had to join together behind whatever the Democratic elites wanted in order to oppose Trump. And for the last 8 years, whatever the Democrats have supported, the upper middle class, elite, eat at Panera Democrats, whatever they've said, that's what we did. And we just kind of shut up because, we have this working class message that we really care about. But Trump And so now that group has totally failed us, right? Like we got behind Biden and Biden failed us. And so now I think what we're seeing is more of a move to that Bernie Sanders working class.
I
sort
have
of
a
thing.
question. The Genocide Joe portion, right? The leftists that were never Biden, similar to the way that the Republicans had a never Trump moment. Like a lot of the Bernie bros that went pro Gaza, like sometimes even pro Hamas in their excesses, were, ringing the bell of Genocide Joe. Was that a big contingent of the civil war that you're talking about?
No,
or was they just the loudest minority?
I think that was college students mostly, and people of Palestinian descent, obviously are going to care a lot about that. And I think a lot of us did care, right? A lot of us would have liked to see kind of a tougher stance, kind of a middle ground. We don't want to treat Israel like it's the 51st state. We are a neutral outsider that, like we're the referee or something like that. And we felt in a lot of ways the Democrats, as the Republicans have always done, were treating Israel like they were part of this country. But this weird thing happened. I think it's weird, where there was this idea that if you opposed any of the actions of Israel, you are an anti-Semite. And I think that really drove a wedge in the party. But I don't think that's the same wedge that I've talked about for the last 16 years.
Well, even in the Hillary, there was the Bernie or bust movement, right?
Yeah.
But was that just a really, really small contingency that I just, running in leftist circles, had heard a lot about?
Yes.
It wasn't a sizable minority?
No, it was sizable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was sizable. And some of those people actually ended up voting for Trump.
That's the weird thing.
Well, they're both populist. It's not weird. If you look at what Bernie was saying in 2016,
I think, like I said, I think that Trump said all of the right things. For me, it's just you look at his policies and it's like, no, he's not on our side. He's on the side of Elon Musk and the billionaires who were sitting behind him. Those are his people, right? But he says the right things.
You mean like Zuckerberg, Democrat, Musk, former Democrat, Bezos, former Democrat? All those people came to Trump. All those people came to the populist movement. Now, I'm not saying they're populist, but I think you can be a billionaire and want what's best for the people.
Yeah, FDR, right?
Yeah. He was a billionaire? I don't know. He's
probably.
Well, he was very wealthy.
Proportional to, like, if you adjust for inflation.
Okay, but yeah.
If you adjust for inflation, he probably was.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think all those people, in one way during the Biden administration, I think us populist Bernie left people won. And that was a lady named Lena Khan was put in charge of the Federal Trade Commission. She was 35 years old. Like she was very much against monopolies and trust and that sort of thing. And like she really like brought the hammer down on that sort of thing. And she made true enemies of a lot of these tech people. She wanted to see tech regulated. She wanted to see AI regulated. We need rules on these things, and I think that really pushed a lot of these tech bros away.
Would you say the future then is going to be like the left is generally going to make the argument that Trump is for billionaires?
Yeah.
God, it seems like I've heard that for so long. We got to come up with something better. But anyway, he's for the billionaires. He's going to enrich the wealthy people. He doesn't care about the people. We do.
Yeah.
You think that's where it's going to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's a working class message. The working people are the heart and soul of this country. And,
but all of the outsourcing, like, and all that, all of what Trump is doing, with tariffs, he hates tariffs. The reason he's imposing tariffs is to help the worker in America.
I don't know that that's the case. I think you can have targeted tariffs that do that. Find specific industries and say,
but don't you agree that those are his motives? Like, don't you think?
No,
I think
he's doing blanket tariffs, right?
Yeah, I think he sees it as a bargaining tool.
Nations, but he's literally said, if you don't want a tariff, make your stuff in America.
Right. But other people are putting tariffs on everything as well, right? So we put tariffs on stuff, but then farmers end up not being able to sell their product. So if he's doing that, I don't think he's doing it very strategically.
Okay.
But I think he sees tariffs more as like some kind of like power tool to try to get power.
But it did work, right? We have 10,000 Mexican troops on the border and 10,000 Canadian troops on the northern border. He's getting what he wants.
I've heard that
It's a tool of leverage.
Right. I've heard that most of that was stuff they were already going to do anyway. I don't know enough to say either way, but he did get Colombia to back down. Now I've also heard that the president
Venezuela?
of Colombia might have been drunk
no.
when he was talking all tough.
Well, he
and
sounded
stuff.
drunk on his Twitter post. It was
Right.
kind of weird.
I don't think tariffs work. Like tariffs, I'll say the Cato Institute line, tariffs not only impose immense economic costs, but also fail to achieve their primary policy.
Right.
And also foster political dysfunction along the way.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they're working like a charm.
But I would say targeted tariffs. If there's a specific industry we're trying to build up and we think that we could really compete in that industry, I'm not against doing
I
that.
disagree with both of you.
But like, I mean, like the elites of the left, like that the Bernie crowd like opposes. Like
Yeah.
we would agree, and I would agree that the right and the left elites, they're both a class. Like DC has been run by a class of elites of
Yeah.
the right and the left. And Trump, I don't know why you don't see it as a positive that Trump went into both elites of both parties and said, "I'm going to use common sense." His inaugural speech it's a revolution of common sense. And again, there's an interview that Steve Bannon did with Baccia under Sargon, probably like a year ago now. She wrote a book called Second Class. She's still a Democrat. Her argument is that Trump is the hero and the man for the working class. I really think that that would be it's right up your alley.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Right.
Let me find that. Well, I think.
Well, no, I would love to see Trump be that person.
Well,
right?
But I think you're more of like a labor Democrat where you're going to support unions. I don't necessarily think Trump is like a big union guy.
But he got the union vote. I mean, the Teamsters.
and I think despite the union organizers, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so here's I think part of the deal is my dad was a pipe fitter before he retired. All my uncles, everybody, they were all labor people. And what they've told me since the 90s is that they hold their nose and vote Democratic. And what they mean is they disagree with every social policy that the Democrats are doing. They don't care about same-sex marriage or transgender, but the Democrats, as long as the Democrats support labor, they're going to vote Democrat. And what I think has happened since 2016 is we've seen less and less support of labor from the Hillary Clinton, style Democrats. And so I think a lot of those people were like, well, they're not fighting for us.
It's literally how Trump won in 2016. He won by something like 80,000 votes over the blue wall, Pennsylvania and Michigan and
Bernie Sanders was a big tariff guy too. Yeah,
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I mean, my point is that I just think that Trump is proving to be the president for the American worker. Wages went up if you look at pre-COVID 2019 numbers, wages were up, inflation was down. I think he was getting close to a point where before COVID spending, you could almost have a balanced budget. Where anyway,
but just to push back on that, if you look at a chart of job growth from 2010 up through 2019, it's steady through the Obama and the Trump years. It's not like Obama was doing horrible and then suddenly Trump. It's the steady trend. So I would argue that was the Obama economy and Trump just came in at the end of it.
All right, fair. I don't think I agree, but I couldn't. I don't know enough to argue. There's a couple of small things just to kind of round up our time. I wanted to point this out because when we did a kind of top 5 election, response or inauguration reflection, I guess, last time, my first thing I said was I wanted a balanced budget amendment. Again, that's common sense. Everyone else has to live by one. Our government should have to live by one to do. One as well. And like with all this talk about DOGE and what they're cutting, and I think you have to have a forcing function. And you can check out our Everyman Commentary Substack where I wrote an article about this. But you have to have a forcing function that forces the government to live within its means. Because as long as we can print money, we won't do it. And so basically, inflation is just the price we pay for the money printing, so that we never have to tell anybody no. A balanced budget would force people to say no. Today, Trump put on Truth balanced budget. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, DJT, all caps. And I thought that was pretty cool. And Elon Musk retweeted that and whatever you call it and said, yes, it's going to happen.
Seems like Michael Scott saying, I declare bankruptcy. We will see if he actually does it. But, I'd rather
it's a very steep hill to climb.
I would rather have a president that wants that than a president that just kicks a can down the road.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, I mean, people on the right that I respect, they are saying time to make military cuts. Time to make military cuts. It's not just the way we got here is that the right said to the Democrats, to the left, we'll give you all the social programs you want if you give us all the military programs we want. And they basically said, well, as long as we're just going to print the money and no one really pays a price except for, Joe Bob, his eggs are $3 a dozen.
Yeah.
Now they're $5 a
Well,
dozen.
it's because of bird flu.
I know that. I know.
Well,
But just to pick on the latest things.
But and the tax cuts on the wealthy as well, right? Because the budget
The
problems.
populace says they're too low. The taxes are too low on the wealthy.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
That's a voice on the right, the so-called right now.
Oh,
The
cool,
populist right, which is really the centrist. I'm telling you,
You're-
there is more common ground than you know.
All of your Tuckers Carlsons are gonna say that like taxes are way too low on the uber wealthy. So
Yeah. So if you look at 1980s, Reagan cuts the taxes on the wealthy from 70% down to 25%. And that's when this budget really starts going out of control. I think that Roosevelt had it a little bit high. He had it at 94% on the richest people. But it goes back to this idea. We're going to spend a lot of money, but we're going to raise the revenue to pay the deficit.
Well, I think we should dramatically cut government spending before we raise taxes. But
and I say it comes down to spending. Reagan was a big spender, and
I mean you have to be trustworthy. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and maybe another couple of quick things. This actually brought about an interesting conversation in our group chat thread, but. One of the things Trump did a few weeks ago was he took the T and the Q off of the state. This is travel.state.gov, for example, LGB travelers. And I thought that was remarkable because, I don't necessarily agree with the L and the G and the B either, by the way. Like, morally speaking, I'm not championing that. But we have not had anybody say no to the sexual identity or identitarian movement ever. This is the first time it's ever been rolled back. It used to be LGB 30, 40 years ago. The T got added, the Q got added, the two-spirit got added, the plus sign got added. I mean, we've all seen the progress flag, right? So, and basically no one has said, wait a minute, no. Like at a government level, no. There are two sexes. And so I just think just putting the so-called flag in the ground, or a stake in the ground or a line in the sand or whatever metaphor you want to use, it's a huge change. It's a huge change to now the government is actually saying, no, we do have a point of view about this, and I think it's quite interesting.
Well, it looks like you just did a control like find and replace. Like, go ahead and read 3 sentences into the Travel State Department Gov paragraph, right?
Many countries do not recognize same-sex marriage. Many countries also do not recognize the X-gender marker in passports and do not have the IT systems at ports.
Substantively, it's the same. He's talking about like having a third gender or whatever. Like the substance of the paragraph is exactly the same.
Yeah.
All he did was Control F and Control replace LGB with LGB. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. I think
The X-gender.
I think no. I think the X-gender is because you could have male. M, F, or X, right?
Right. That's transgender. That's like a third gender. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
the T.
The reason they're saying that is because look, if you want to go, I don't know, to Saudi Arabia,
Right.
they're not going to recognize X gender, so it just creates confusion for us around the world. And so why do that? That's fine that's the reason. I'm okay with that. They're not. I mean, I don't think Donald Trump is particularly principled on the LGBTQ issue. Okay, I think he's kind of weirded out by where the left went in the last few years, and I don't think he likes women and girls sports. What a photo op that was, by the way, surrounded by all these little girls in the Oval Office. Big win there, getting men out of women's sports. But no, I just think the point is there's just a vibe shift. There's just a tone shift where we're saying, like, no, there are limits. You can be gay. You can do gay things.
I think he understands right up to the line of like drag. And I think everything beyond drag kind of confuses him.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I wonder, I don't know, has the left kind of gone apoplectic about this? Or even on the left, I kind of get the impression that there's a lot of people on the left that are like, yeah, we're not really that excited about the T either.
Right. Yeah. I think we strongly believe that all people should be treated with respect and dignity, right? By the mere fact that they're human beings. If somebody is transgender, we should treat them as a fellow human being, as a neighbor. But I think there has always been disagreement as to, when it comes to sports, when it comes to bathrooms. What I think, I think y'all still haven't really thought about, what about that person who was born female but now looks like a male, who's going to walk into the women's bathroom with a beard and a low voice?
Like they've already transitioned.
Right.
So
Yes.
I don't think people can transition, for the record, but yeah,
Right.
I see what you're saying.
I'm saying you would think they were a dude if you saw them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I didn't know, then I didn't know.
If you would,
What I don't know doesn't hurt me,
Yeah. Like ideally, we would just have separate, a third bathroom for people, but sometimes it's just not possible. And I don't know.
I don't like the
know
third
perfect
bathrooms. I mean, I don't like, aesthetically, I don't like the third bathrooms.
okay.
Like they're big and they're loud and, anyway, just my thing. But anyway, okay, last point, I just wanted to point this out, which is because there is going to be a debate in the very near future about whether the Department of Education should exist, which I want to say this, by the way, too, because there's this whole thing about like what rights does the executive branch have? I just want to say, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. A lot of our federal government, I think, is unconstitutional. It's not provided for in the Constitution. It shouldn't exist at all. It's not the government's job to provide for our general welfare in the sense that it's been interpreted. And so all these executive actions, all these executive orders through the years that gave rise to all these agencies, which are under the executive branch. Trump came in with the theory of the executive branch. He is executing on that theory. And ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to decide if he's right or not. I think they will agree with him. But that said, we're going to have a debate about whether the Department of Education is good or not. And anyway, I found this helpful chart. And the bottom line is that if you look at spending, it's going this way on the the chart. And if you look at results in, say, math and reading tests, they're going down. So spending is way above inflation. Reading grades are way down. So the bottom line is, since, say, 2013 in particular, we spend an average of $16,500 per pupil. That's just from 2013, and the results are bad.
Yeah. As a teacher, I just want to say, I think this is the reason. We allowed cell phones in classes, and
He's holding a cell phone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we allowed cell phones in classes, and I think that is really what's going on. As well as we teach to the test now because we grade schools on the testing. But.
Well, I mean, the entire education system is based on like the Prussian model, which was designed to make good little factory workers and good little soldiers. Yeah. Right. I think that thing you held up, that cell phone, might be more of a pro than you would be willing to admit. We've talked about this concept before. You're familiar with the concept of crabs in a bucket? Crabs in a bucket don't need a lid, right? Okay. Because when they try to climb out, the ones on the bottom also try to climb out and grab the ones on top and pull them down. And I'm afraid that's just what modern schooling is, right? Mm-hmm. And so many kids have just the world's library at their fingertips, right? We have the Library of Alexandria in our pockets. Yeah. And if you want to learn, you're able to, right? And I know how you feel about income inequality. We're going to see a massive gap in education inequality moving forward. Just for the kids that want to learn are going to learn. And the kids that don't want to learn, they're going to just be scrolling TikTok on that during class, and
not if it's banned.
Not if it's banned.
Right. But they'll scroll something else. Yeah.
They'll scroll something else.
And hopefully it's my TikTok, so I can teach them something.
Yeah. Well, we'll let you shout that out here in a sec. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. There's going to be a lot of demagoguing, but the fact is, like, we don't have good results. It's just like with Robert Kennedy at HHS. It's like, I'm stealing from the Babylon Bee, but it's something like, world's, least healthy nation is worried, RFK Jr. might do something different. Another former Democrat there. Mm-hmm. And it's like, at this point, like, shouldn't we be like open to trying things? Shouldn't we just open the books and see what we're spending our money on? Because we're in $36 trillion of debt, and it's growing every 100 days. It's like another $1 trillion. Like, something has to change, right? Like, we're unhealthy. Something has to change. Our kids are not well educated. Like, I just don't know why there's like basically not a common interest in changing the way we do things, except for the fact that huge amounts of money seems to go into the government and into the hands of the people that run the thing. Yeah.
How do you feel about vouchers, school vouchers?
I oppose school vouchers.
They're like the follow the backpack funding model, right? Where you give
Right.
the parents I think it's
So a few different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is because I think it's going to be run by very wealthy people whose goal is to make a profit. And the best way to make a profit is to have online schools. And I don't think that online schools work. And I say that's the best way to make a profit because you don't have to pay for buildings, don't have to pay for teachers. You just have multiple choice tests. And there you go. Just
but if the kid's
online
failing in
anytime.
that, the parent can send them to a different one. If the money follows the backpack, right? Rather than following the zip code.
Yeah, but I mean, you could just go to Quizlet and look up the answers. I know because I've taught online classes at the college level, and there's easy tricks to cheat and everything else. And so what I think will happen with those, because I've seen it at the college level, is instead of investing their money in teachers and education, they will invest it in TV commercials, advertisements. And so parents will see these beautiful advertisements for these for-profit online schools that have very low outcomes as far as education. Meanwhile, the actual public schools can't afford to put TV commercials up, and they're investing in education, and the students are going to the online schools because they have better commercials.
But if the outcomes are low, why would the parents send them your kids in school for like 12 years, right? Why would you send them the next year if the school's not what it proclaims to be?
As a former high school teacher, I never once had a parent come in and say, "Why aren't you teaching my child more?" But I had a lot of parents come in and say, "Why isn't my child passing? Can you just help my child pass?" On the college level, students sign up for their teachers, and large groups of them sign up for the easiest professors, not for the one that's going to teach them the most. And so I think that's the kind of race to the bottom. School choice for many people, and I agree that there's an elite upper middle class that wants their kid to get into Harvard. But I think that the average folks I was raised around, my family when I was growing up, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to just get that high school diploma. And I worry about that.
I would love to have an hour-long conversation with you about education.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. All right, we got to run. Cody, where can people find you on TikTok?
Find me on TikTok, Cody Pogue, CodyPogue.
And
I'm Ken. Find me at Theology by the Pint.
to
I'm not
Theology by
telling
the
you. I'm not telling you guys where I work.
there you go. And I'm Evan. I'm at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. Thanks for listening. And until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.
Peace.